Hello, I'm Caroline Bolling. I'm a sports physiotherapist from Brazil. And today I will guide you to this idea of understand complex systems and the challenges and opportunities that we have in dance injury research. As a clinician, I work with elite athletes and also artists from Cirque du Soleil. And as a researcher, I try to do qualitative research, understanding why and how people do injury prevention. And in this way, I try to also apply concepts of complexity. But I'm talking about complexity. What is complexity?
Collective behaviour is all around us. We see bird flocks, fish schools, animal herd. And what really defines these systems is that there's no global orchestrating power. The individual units are locally communicating with each other, and remarkably through these types of communication we get animal groups able to synchronise their motion and respond to predators in a way that we couldn't possibly imagine. We're still fairly bad at predicting collective behaviours. And one of the reasons is that there are many emergent properties that you don't necessarily expect based on the individual components. And that's why many of these systems, even relatively simple organizations like schools of fish, are so mysterious to us. Collective behavior is all around us. We see bird flocks, fish schools, and
Well, the point is, recent publications are claiming that we should change the paradigm and our approach in researching sports injury. And the idea is that we need to bring complexity and understand through the lenses of complexity the problem of sports injuries. But when I talk about complexity, what does it mean? So complexity is this dynamic interrelations between, amongst other, physical, biological, ecological, technical, economic, and social aspects. It sounds quite broad. What does make so different? So let's go back to what it is dance injury. Usually we study and research and try to understand the dance injury looking mostly to the injury, which makes sense. And then we also look to the dancer and the factors related to the dancers. But we need to keep the idea of the big picture because this dancer, it's dance a specific dance style in a specific company in a specific country. And there is few things part of this dancer that change the way that we can deal, also manage and prevent this injury. So in the dance style, you can imagine like the culture that it's behind different dance styles, like classical ballet and contemporary dance. Company, you can imagine company budget or how you can organize your season. So that would be in some way changing the way that we are thinking about the injury, not just that dancer and injury, but also this broad concept of everything that is around the dancer. And those multi-levels, they will also communicate. If we look to injury research, dance injury research, this is a systematic review from Sarah Kenny and other authors. And those are the risk factors that they found in the literature, that not exactly with the level of evidence, but you can see that most of them have mostly dance related factors. So everything is quite proximal to the event of the injury. What is wrong with that? Well, we developed our research, and this is not just dance research, it's also like the biomedical research through a reductionist approach. By doing that, we create little silos and make every discipline to work in boxes. And the main thing that we are looking for, the main research question is, why does this happen? And usually we think in this idea of A to B, and if we think about a multiple cause, it's A, B, C, but still, we are thinking that there will be a cause that you can justify that effect. This is a quote from one of my favorite philosophers, and this is a great dancer too. But the quote says, one must have chaos to be able to give birth to a dancing star. And then if we talk about chaos and physics, it's about this property of complex systems whose behavior is so unpredictable as to appear random. So chaos in this way could be meaning unpredictability. What is the problem with our paradigm of reductionist approach and the unpredictability? This is an interesting book. It's called Black Swan, and the author is Nassim Taleb. And the main idea of this book, it's not about the beautiful solo of the Swan Lake, is idea that a black swan, it's a highly improbable event. It's unpredictable, carries a massive impact, and after it happened, we are able to explain as less random and more predictable. We have some examples that it's like the success of Google, 9/11, rise of some religions, or even some events of our personal life. And some discussion that's going on right now with COVID-19 is or is not a black swan, if it was predictable or not. But the idea is that we are used to think that we are able to predict things because they seem to follow a certain normality. But more and more we see that there is a nonlinearity in some events and how some things in the world happen. So maybe the idea of prediction, it's something that will not really get so far for us. And why it's so difficult to accept that we cannot predict? Because to do that, we need to accept complexity. And by accepting complexity, we also will need to accept everything that comes with that. One of them, the unpredictability. This means that we will have some ontological implications. The ontology, it's the idea that we know what things are. It's the to be or not to be. So what if the to be of the dance injuries are that injuries are complex phenomena? The dance injuries are complex. By accepting that, the complexity nature of the dance injuries, we will also need to accept the properties of complex systems. Pina Bausch used to say, I'm not concerned with the way my dancers move, but what moves my dancers. And I like this quote because in the idea of complexity, we need to start to change the way that we make questions or what we want to know. Why I'm saying that? Well, because of those properties that are just part of any system, complex system. Self-organization and emergency. So as the video was saying, the behaviors and the relations and interrelations between, for instance, the animals in a fish school or with the birds, this is all something that it seems like there is an emergent pattern, and the system itself organized in an evolutionary dynamic, so constantly moving and changing and becoming something different. So in this way, the system is never at rest. There is no end point, there is no equilibrium, there is no balance. So it's that constant moving and the emergence of new patterns. So the system that you have right now will not be the same system that you have in 1 month, 2 months. If we think about assessing, for instance, a dancer right now and assessing the same dancer in the end of the season and after they dance a contemporary dance or a classical ballet, there will be new emergency patterns and they will self-organize and create solutions for them. And they do all that in a non-linear behavior. By having a non-linear behavior, accepting complexity will take us to also epistemological implication. And epistemology, it's the way we know things. It's, for instance, how we produce knowledge and evidence. And if we really accept complexity, we will need to use methods that can deal with the dynamic nature of the complex systems. So, how complex does a problem can be? So, back to a health problem. This is a map that I love. It's the Foresight Obesity Systems map. You can go to the web page that they have. But in this case, in the middle, you can see that there is the energy balance. And that's the easiest way to explain why an injury happened, obesity happened. Well, it's because someone eats more and consumes less. Okay, we got that. But then, what does that have to be with what we're talking about? The thing is, when we start to accept complexity, we start to see how some distal factors can in some way contribute to the problem. So if we look a little bit closer to the same map, we have societal influences. For instance, media. Nowadays, we have the big power of social media saying what you should eat, what you should not. Food production, and also the accessibility that you have, taxes that you pay for healthy food. Individual psychology, the activity itself, the environment, and then there is some points of biology. And this is, of course, it's example from obesity. But taking another example, there's this collective effort from the WHO, the World Health Organization, to try to understand how could we increase physical activity. And in this map, you can have the same idea. Of course, you just want to make sure that people get more active. But there is many factors around that, and I love the white circles on top, that it's mostly about culture. And then you can see how this can change depending on which country or which cultural background you have. So there is, for instance, cycling culture. I live here in Netherlands, and I know that they cycle to go everywhere. And the other point there is, for instance, the fear of crime and antisocial behavior. I am from Brazil, and I know that there is many people that walk less in the street because they don't feel safe. So in this way, you can see how broad this can be if we really decide to take a look in a big picture. Of course, I try to do that too, in my own way. So this is one of the studies that I conduct, applying systems thinking together with qualitative research. I went to 6 different shows from Cirque du Soleil, and I interview artistic directors, coaches, physios, and the artists themselves. And I was trying to understand the specific context in which the injury occurs and what will be the way that they see injury prevention. And when I start to plot all the concepts that were during my study and the artists and the other stakeholders mentioned, I got to this quite chaotic um, system that you can see that there is many interrelations, but it's quite difficult to follow. So if I guide you a bit, this is, for instance, load. And load, there is many options. The psychological load, mental load in this case, or, for instance, physical load. The physical load for people from CERC, there is some the show load, and there is the training load. And then if you go to that, there is also the technique, for instance, that change the loads that they have depending on how technical they can be, or even the movement quality that this artist has. And for the training, the background and what it's the discipline that this artist is doing change completely the loads that they have by the end of the day. And this sounds really not organized and difficult to follow and to see all the relations. But then I try to organize this and look to the artist. And around the artist, there is many artist-related factors. Those factors that we know, we already heard about. So technique, background, stability. Me as a physio, it's many of those that we try to change or to improve in the artist. But around that, there is what we call the extrinsic risk factors. They're still relatively close from the artist and from the injuries itself, like equipment, which can have like a clear connection, and social support, touring conditions that it's totally related also with recovery, but also traveling time, quality of sleep. But outside that, there was also the process. So those artists, they mention what were the main process that they go through for injury prevention. So preparation, physical and mental, load management, and safety procedures that are in place. The interesting part about this study, it's what it comes next. It's all these stakeholders that in some way are connected to many of those factors. So in this way, multiple sectors and stakeholders need to play different roles in our collective mission to prevent injuries. That was my take on this study and how I try to apply the complexity in this point. The thing is, applying complexity, it's not such an easy thing. We're going to face some challenges. And putting again what quote from a dancer, Isadora Duncan, that the dance, it is the rhythm of all that dies in order to live again. It is the eternal rising of the sun. And what made me put this, it's exactly what I feel that it's one of the biggest challenges that we have to apply complexity in our research, is the concept of temporality. The dynamic idea of complexity and the idea that new patterns will emerge goes a little bit against what we are used in our traditional methods and research, because we usually look back or then we follow up in a way that we want to predict and understand how a specific phenomenon work. But the question here is, how do we do that if we already know that this system will not be the same system where I want to, for instance, apply my intervention? I say that sometimes it's how, if anyone ever try to change your clothes when you were going from one point to another and you were driving a car, and you kind of try to predict or plan, like, okay, when I get the next traffic light, I will get my shoes in my bag. Oh, I will change my coat. Oh, I will take this sleeve, and then the traffic light, it's green, or someone, it's too slow, and then you don't have all the time that you wanted to be in the traffic light. So all those things that in some way you can plan, but you also need to understand that will be dynamic and it will change. And with that come also the idea of the contextual. So the solutions that we propose in one specific context might be completely different than the solutions that are good for a different context. So it's two different contexts, we probably will have two different solutions. And that's okay because it's the main idea of complexity. So if we go and look back to the obesity system map and this crazy and big picture of looking to obesity, how could we in some way build something like that for dense injuries? Well, that's something that I'm still working on, so it's still work in progress. And when I did a study, a similar study of qualitative studies with the National Ballet in Amsterdam, I asked them what makes you get injured. And most of them wouldn't be in that line of, oh, there is load and low capacity, and this balance is what will produce what makes me get injured. But then the interesting thing here is see that there is many factors that were in some way related or changing load capacity or changing load. And when I try to look that, I know that it's still quite simplistic. And I was checking this really nice summary of the good works that were presented last year in Montreal in the A. Adams 2019. And those dense science studies that could one day change our approach in the studio. And some of them I know personally, Nico, Jeff Russell, Liliana. Can they change our approach in the studio one day? Well, I truly believe we all can. But then goes back to the simplicity of my map. So what we should be doing, if I look to that, to those ideas, we have like strength training, we have equipment in some way with the padded socks, we have the talk about stress, the perfectionist, the psychological skills and the coping, hypermobility. So it's trauma. It's so many different things. But the problem is we are doing that all in separate boxes and silos. So what if we would get my little map there, but then I would get all the ideas of the psychology, the psychological part, the cultural part, the organizational part, biomechanics, social. What if we would make this system of looking to dense injury in a really broad and systemic way? And in this way, I'm making here a call for all of us to try to work together and get to this level. Because I talk about challenges, but I also see many opportunities. There is some leverage points that you can look into the system. If we know that small changes can provide big effect, maybe we should be, instead of looking to just risk factors, we should be looking to those interactions that are in some way leverage points that make big changes in the system. The idea of unicausal or multicausal, it doesn't fit when we accept complexity. It's dynamic and it's interrelational. So instead of to spend time keep looking to the risk factors, maybe we should make this a little bit more broad and start to imagine how one risk factor can interrelate with another one, and this interaction, what is the product of that. To do that, we will need multiple approaches. And as I said, it's not just one discipline. We need to do it applying different methods. We will need big data maybe and artificial intelligence. And we can also think about the qualitative, but also some specific methods from biomechanics and from the epidemiology. So it's more like try to use many fields working together. And by doing that, we will start to create multi-level interventions, not just targeting one point of the system, but the system itself. And in this way, we can use even the self-organization in our favor. Let the system show you the way. We see that all the time, how dancers can be so easily adaptable and create new solutions and new ways, and being flexible in this way to behave and create a new pattern with this emergent pattern. So maybe it's give also the opportunity to explore a little bit the self-efficacy and see how the system is self-organizing and creating solutions by itself. Back to one of my favorite quotes that I said in the beginning, that we need to have chaos to be able to give birth to a dancing star. The real meaning of chaos in this quote, it's not the physics that I was talking about in the beginning and all the unpredictability. It comes from the Greek idea of chaos, and it's the emptiness of the universe before things came into being. And in this way, I will make the call that we maybe have the opportunity to have a new start, a new beginning in trying to accept the chaos. So, as a last message, I would just invite you all. Are you ready to deal with complexity? To do that, we will need to address our certainty. We need to question our methods. We will need to embrace the unknown, the unpredictable. But the main message here is we can only do this if we work together. It's about looking to the system, to the big picture, and complementing our approaches. So the idea is that we cannot keep trying to solve the problems by using the same kind of thinking that we use when we create them. So I hope you join my call to accept complexity. Thank you.